January 10th, 1945, Bastogne, Belgium. Snow pressed against the shattered windows like a living thing, hissing where it met candle heat and vanishing into the smell of ether and iron. The church had lost its roof weeks ago. Canvas had been stretched across the ribs of the beams, and the wind made the fabric breathe, in and out, like a lung for the dying. Beneath it, on pews dragged into rows and altars turned into tables, a German field hospital tried to outpace the winter. Dr. Friedrich Adler counted pulses, with fingers gone numb inside thin gloves. He had learned to measure life by touch alone, 1, 2, 3 on a wrist, the pulse of a boy who still had frost in his eyelashes. Then the soft stutter of an older sergeant whose boots were 2 sizes too big because that was all they had left. He wrote in a narrow notebook he kept hidden under his coat. Time of admission, wounds, temperature, when they had a thermometer that still worked. He did not write feelings. Feelings had no place between triage tags and shortages. A shell landed somewhere beyond the square. The stone under his feet trembled. Dust fell like grey snow into the real snow. Someone muttered a prayer in the Brabant dialect, and someone else told him to shut up. In the far corner, a harmonica tried 3 notes and gave up. Friedrich tightened the canvas bandage around a thigh, tied a surgeon's knot that his hands could do blind, and moved on. They brought in an American just before dusk. He came on a door, taken from a ruined house, carried by 2 German stretcher-bearers and 1 boy whose face couldn't decide whether to be 14 or 40. The American's jacket was dark with meltwater. A white scarf at his neck had turned the same grey as the church air. He wasn't bleeding as much as the others, and somehow that made it worse. The wound was deep but tidy, a shard through the flank, the kind of injury that made men quiet. His dog tags clinked against each other with every step, a polite sound in a rude room. "Prisoner," the corporal said, as if diagnosis and sentence were the same word. Friedrich looked at the tags but didn't read. Names complicated things. "Put him there," he said, pointing to the end of a pew where saints used to sit. He knelt, checked the breath, pressed fingers to the wrist. Warm. Present. Human. The word rose uninvited, and he pushed it down. A nurse, Elsa from Cologne, the kind of woman who had forgotten her own softness to survive this winter, handed him a bowl of water with a brittle rim of ice. "We're nearly out of morphine," she said without meeting his eyes. "How nearly?" he asked. 2 ampules. 3 if you forgive the air bubble. He didn't answer. In the notebook he wrote, "Male, approx. 22-25, penetrating wound, right flank, shock moderate, pulse 98. He hesitated, then added a small cross in the margin, his private code for "don't let him talk." Talking opened doors best left closed. The American opened his eyes anyway. They were pale, the color of the sky when the snow holds back. He tried to sit up and winced. "Doc?" he said, the English syllables soft as steam. Friedrich had heard the word from his own men when they were too far gone for formality. He pressed a hand to the American's shoulder and kept him down. "Still," he said in German first, then in careful English, "don't move. Am I in Bastogne?" The accent made the vowels wider. "You are under a roof," Friedrich said. "That is already something." He cleaned the wound with water that hurt to touch. The American hissed, then clenched his jaw. No screaming. The quiet ones made it harder to do triage with the cold arithmetic it required. From the nave, a voice called orders about evacuating the worst cases before nightfall. Another voice argued about fuel. Someone laughed too loudly at a joke no one had wanted to tell. The war outside pushed its way into the room and laid hands on everything. The bowls, the gauze, the way men looked at each other. Elsa returned with a wrapped ampule. "If you give him this, what do I say to Lechner when his turn comes?" Her eyes flicked toward a young German in the next row, grey beneath his stubble. He's been asking for you. Friedrich weighed the glass between finger and thumb. One ampule was a decision with a name at both ends. He thought of the lecture halls in Leipzig, of diagrams drawn in clean ink on clean paper. He thought of the oath his professor had recited the day they donned white coats, the old words made new by a war they had not imagined. You will treat the sick to the best of your ability. No footnote about uniforms. The American watched him, trying not to. He had the posture of someone who apologized for taking up space. The scarf at his neck was the kind a mother knits when she's sure her boy is coming back. "What is your name?" Friedrich asked, breaking his own rule. The American swallowed. "Tom," he said, and then, slower, as if the admission cost him something, "Thomas Briggs." Friedrich didn't write it down. He didn't need the ink to remember. He fished in the tray, took a smaller needle, and decided to let the ampule wait. "Breathe," he said. "I will be quick." He worked with the economy that days like this demanded: irrigate, probe, pack, bind, and tried not to hear how the wind made the canvas above them gasp. The edges of the wound shivered under his forceps like a mouth forming the word "why." Tom's hand closed on the edge of the pew. He didn't curse. He didn't beg. At the worst of it, he said only one word, and he said it to the ceiling. "Please." The prayer threaded itself through the Latin carved in the stone. It did not sound like an enemy's voice. When it was done, Friedrich sat back on his heels. He checked the pulse again, 90, steadier, and let the silence settle. Elsa exhaled the breath she'd been holding. She pretended to arrange instruments while she studied the American's face, surprise and recognition fighting behind her eyes. "Thank you," Tom said, the English stretching at the corners. He said it like a man at a kitchen table might say it for a glass of water. Words like that were not in the inventory. They cracked something in the cold. Friedrich stood too fast. He capped the ampule, slipped it back into the pouch, and nodded to Elsa. "Dressings every 4 hours. Keep him warm if you can." He began to turn away, then stopped, the habit of accuracy dragging him back. "He will need warmth more than anything," he added, hearing how strange the sentence sounded in a place where warmth was a rumor. At the far end of the church, a junior officer from the military police strode between cots, the black of his collar tabs sharp as a warning. He paused at the sight of Tom, made a small noise of disdain, and moved on. "Waste of linen," he said to no one in particular. "Save it for our own." Elsa's mouth tightened, but she kept her eyes on the bowl. Friedrich felt the old training rise in him like a wall. The lessons that had divided the world into clean categories painted on maps. He had believed them as a younger man because they made complicated things simple. But the simplicity had melted here, under canvas and snow, and was seeping away between the stones. He went to the sacristy where they kept supplies, and, when no one watched, opened his notebook. The page caught light from a candle stub. He wrote the facts in his small, precise hand. Evening, temperature falling, 3 amputations, 1 death, 1 American, penetrating wound, stabilized. His pen hovered, then moved with a decision he did not feel entitled to make. He said thank you. He closed the notebook and pressed it under his coat, where his heart could keep the paper warm. He had not written what he was thinking, because there are thoughts that will not fit inside a line, and there are thoughts that cannot be said out loud in winter. But they were there, crowding the edges of his careful script, pushing at the border of what a man is allowed to admit. If this already unsettles you, stay with me. What happens next will test the last thing he still believed, that a doctor's hands could remain untouched by the war that made them necessary. 2 days later, the cold deepened into something that felt deliberate, as if the sky itself had turned against both armies. Frost crawled across the walls inside the church, spreading thin veins of ice over the stone like some quiet infection. The wounded slept in shifts, wrapped in whatever could be found, coats, blankets, torn banners that once hung over altars. Friedrich woke before dawn. His back ached from sleeping against the pew, his eyes raw from smoke. He checked pulses by candlelight, adjusted bandages, whispered small lies that helped men hold on. "You'll be fine. It looks better today." The words came automatically, part of a ritual that no longer fooled anyone. When he reached the far pew, Tom Briggs was awake. The color had returned to his face. He was thinner but alert. He tried to smile when he saw the doctor. "You're still here," he said softly. The English cracked at the edges. "I live here now," Friedrich replied, the hint of humor unintentional. He set down the lantern, unwrapped the bandage, and inspected the wound. Clean, no new bleeding. Healing slowly. A rare success. Tom winced as the cold air touched his skin. "You know," he said. "Back home, they tell us you people. You don't keep prisoners alive. That you—" He stopped himself, embarrassed. "Sorry." Friedrich didn't look up. "They tell us the same about you," he said. "That you shoot the wounded. That you burn what you can't take." He paused, then added quietly, "Perhaps both sides are running out of imagination." Tom gave a faint laugh, then coughed until it hurt. "Guess the stories help us hate each other. Makes it easier to fight." "It makes it easier to live," Friedrich said, tightening the bandage. "Until it doesn't." Outside, someone shouted orders. A truck engine coughed, failed to start, and was replaced by the rhythmic stomp of boots. Another batch of wounded was arriving, men pulled from the snowfields beyond Bastogne, some barely breathing, some already gone. Elsa entered, her face pale and distant. "More casualties," she said. And the SS officer asked about the American again. Friedrich's hands froze over the bandage. "What did you tell him?" "That he's still alive, that's all." He nodded slowly, though his pulse quickened. "He should be moved to the far side, behind the columns, out of sight." Elsa frowned. "You'll get yourself in trouble." "I'm already in trouble," he said. She left to prepare the stretchers, and Friedrich returned his attention to Tom. "If anyone asks," he said, "you're part of a medical exchange. Understand?" Tom blinked, confused. "I don't know what that means." "Neither do they," Friedrich said, "which is why it might work." For the rest of the day, the hospital was a storm of movement. New patients, new deaths, officers shouting for morphine that didn't exist. Amid the noise, Friedrich worked with a calm that came from exhaustion rather than discipline. He cut away frozen cloth, cauterized wounds with heated scalpels, and kept his head low whenever the SS officer passed by. That night, when the chaos slowed and the lamps burned low, he opened his notebook again. The ink shivered with each tremor of his hand. January 12th. More frostbite, more silence. One American improving. Spoke of his home. Ohio, a farm, horses. Laughed when I told him about the Rhine. He stopped writing. His pen hovered, then added a line in smaller script. "He is not what they say he is." He closed the book quickly, heart hammering. The sentence felt dangerous, like speaking a forbidden prayer. If anyone read it, if the wrong eyes saw those words, they would call it weakness. Treason. But for the first time in months, Friedrich felt something resembling peace. Not the peace of winning or losing, but of remembering that he was still human. Just before dawn, boots thundered against the church floor. A shout cut through the cold. "Inspection! All personnel, prepare!" The SS officer strode in, coat shining, breath fogging in the air. His eyes swept the rows, stopping when they reached Tom Briggs. "Why is this man still here?" he demanded. Friedrich stepped forward before Elsa could speak. "Medical necessity. He's valuable for interrogation once stable." The officer studied him, then the prisoner. "He looks too well to be wounded," he said with suspicion. "Perhaps your treatment is too generous." Friedrich held his gaze. Healing makes a man talkative. That's useful, isn't it? The officer smirked. Be careful, Doctor. Mercy is not a weapon we use. When he left, the room exhaled as one. Elsa turned to Friedrich, whispering harshly, "You can't keep doing this. He'll come back." "I know," he said. That night, he moved Tom's cot closer to the rear door, near the crates of bandages and alcohol. The air was colder there, but quieter. "If they come for you," he said, "don't speak, don't move, just stay alive." Tom looked at him for a long time. "Why are you helping me?" Friedrich didn't have an answer ready. Finally he said, "Because someone has to remember that we're not monsters." He left before Tom could reply. Later, when the candles had burned to their final stubs, Friedrich took out his diary again. The ink bled into the page where his fingers shook. They called them monsters. But tonight, one of them thanked me, and I believed him. I do not know what that makes me. He closed the book and tucked it beneath the floorboard near his cot. Outside, the snow kept falling, steady, relentless, washing the world in silence that made all lies sound smaller. If this story has reached you so far, stay with me. Because before this winter ends, that notebook and the words inside it will decide who survives and who disappears into the snow. By the end of January, the front had shifted west, and the once crowded church was quiet, except for the drip of thawing ice. The wounded who could walk had been sent deeper into Germany. The rest waited for spring or mercy, whichever arrived first. Friedrich moved through the aisles like a ghost of routine, changed dressings, boil instruments, write in the notebook when the candles allowed. Tom was still there. His wound had closed into a pale ridge, the color of wax. He spent his days helping the nurse lift buckets, translating when captured Americans were brought in. The other medics eyed him, but said nothing. The war was ending slowly. Everyone pretended not to notice. One morning, while Friedrich was washing his hands in water that smelled faintly of fuel, Tom said, "When this is over, you should come to Ohio. I'll show you a sky that doesn't have planes in it." Friedrich looked at him, surprised. "I think the ocean might object." Tom grinned. "Then maybe one day I'll cross it for you." The words were too big for the room. They hung there, absurd and beautiful, until a knock shattered them. The SS officer stepped inside with two men behind him. His eyes were sharp now, focused. "Dr. Adler, a report came through. One of the prisoners here is missing from the records." Friedrich dried his hands slowly. "We have no missing prisoners." The officer's gaze slid to Tom. "Then this one, why is he still breathing?" "Because I am a doctor," Friedrich said, his voice even. "Because orders were to keep him alive for questioning." The officer smiled without warmth. "Interrogation units have moved out. He's no longer required." Elsa froze at the table, her knuckles white on the bandage roll. Friedrich stepped between the officer and the cot. "He's still recovering." "I didn't ask about his health," the man said, drawing his pistol with a casual motion, as if reaching for a spoon. "Step aside." Friedrich didn't move. "If you shoot him, you'll damage the building. The walls are unstable." The officer laughed softly. "You think I care about stones?" "No," Friedrich said, "but I care about men." The silence that followed was a thin wire stretched between them. Snowflakes drifted through the gaps in the roof and melted on the barrel of the gun. After a long moment, the officer holstered it. "You have a soft heart, Doctor. I wonder how long it will keep beating." He turned on his heel and left. The boots of his men echoed down the nave until the door slammed. Tom let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "You just risked your neck." Friedrich sat heavily on the nearest crate. "It's already broken," he said, and rubbed his eyes. That night, while the others slept, Friedrich wrote his longest entry yet, January 30th. They say the Führer trusts only steel and fire. I trust pulse and breath. The American is alive. I will hide this notebook soon. If they find it, they will burn me with it. But I must write the truth, because someone, somewhere, must know that we saw each other and did not hate. He tore out that page, folded it twice, and pressed it into Tom's hand before dawn. "Keep it with you," he said. "If you are captured again, give it to whoever finds you." Tom frowned. "You'll get in trouble." Friedrich smiled faintly. "I already am." 2 nights later, the sound of engines filled the valley. American forces were advancing. The Germans began to evacuate what was left of the hospital. Orders came fast and confused. Burn documents, move supplies, leave the unfit behind. Friedrich argued until his voice broke, but the trucks were leaving. He turned to Tom. "You can walk now, go. Follow the road north until you hear English." Tom hesitated. "And you?" "Someone has to close the door." Before Tom could speak, Friedrich pushed him toward the back entrance, the same door where he'd hidden the notebook weeks before. "Go," he repeated. "If anyone stops you, tell them you were treated by a man who forgot to hate." Tom looked back once, nodded, and vanished into the storm. When the Americans finally took Bastogne again, they found the church mostly empty. Amid the ashes and medical debris, an officer discovered a small notebook wedged behind a loose brick. Inside were entries written in a precise hand, smudged by smoke and fingerprints. The last line read, "They are not monsters. They are men." No one knew who had written it. The name on the first page was half-burned, unreadable. But the diary passed from hand to hand, translated and copied, until it found its way to an archive in Stuttgart years later. Some said Dr. Friedrich Adler died during the retreat. Others claimed he was seen near the Rhine in the spring of 1945, still treating the wounded, still writing. The truth faded into the fog of history, like everything else that winter. Yet his words survived. A quiet defiance carved into paper. In a war built on obedience, he chose compassion. In a world that demanded hatred, he listened instead. They are not monsters. They never were. If this story reached you, remember it the next time someone tells you who your enemy should be. And tell me, if you had been in that church, freezing and afraid, would you have had the courage to see the enemy as human?